What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 91 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about a Superman book. Superman, The Return of Superman, also known as The Reign of the Supermen. This is the third and final part of the Death of Superman saga. I've talked a little bit about the other two parts of this storyline in earlier videos, and today I want to talk about this story, which is my favorite part of the whole Death of Superman ordeal. So I've talked a little bit about how this whole storyline came about. Real quick recap for those who didn't watch those earlier videos. Basically, the people who were doing the Superman comics, they wanted to get Lois and Clark married, and then the people who were doing the Lois and Clark TV show said, no, you can't do that, you're going to have to delay that wedding. So they had to find some way to delay that wedding for a few years, and so they decided to go ahead and kill off Superman. And so they had this big, long event. They did the Death of Superman part, which was kind of drawn out. They did World Without a Superman, which was kind of drawn out. And then they did the Return of Superman, which started with the four Supermen coming to replace the original Superman. And this story is like 3 times longer than Death of Superman and World Without a Superman. But I'm okay with this being as long as it is because this book introduces 4 brand new protagonists to replace Superman. And that was something that I thought was kind of genius and also seems like a given. You've killed off Superman and you have 4 ongoing titles. What are you going to do with those 4 titles? Let's introduce a replacement Superman for each title. That's really cool. And the Spider-Man comics actually did something kind of like that in the late 90s when J. Jonah Jameson had put out a bounty on Spider-Man. He decided to temporarily retire the identity of Spider-Man and then replace Spider-Man with 3 alternative identities, because there were 3 or 4, it might have been 4, there were 4 Spider-Man comics going on at that time, so they did the same thing that the Death of Superman did, where they had 4 alternative identities for Spider-Man, but there it made absolutely no sense, because why would Peter Parker suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to have 4 new identities to replace my life as Spider-Man? That just seemed arbitrary and didn't really make a lot of sense for the character to do that. It just felt like they were doing that because they had 4 Spider-Man titles, whereas here, it's not a character doing anything, it's just 4 people suddenly rising to the ranks to replace Superman. And then we find out that not all of them are what they seem. And what I really like about this chunk of the Death of Superman event is that it makes lemonade out of some really sour lemons. They were told that they couldn't do a story that they really felt passionate about and they really wanted to do, so they tell a pretty interesting story that has some interesting changes and alterations for the Superman mythos. It introduces Steel and Superboy, who are 2 characters from the 90s that I really love. I really love Steel in the JLA series from the 90s. He joined the JLA a few years after this event. I really, really love this version of Superboy, and I really miss him. I really wish that we could have this version of Superboy back in the comics that we have now, but that doesn't seem to be in the cards, which is a shame. But I really love this particular version of Superboy. And then this also brings back 2 other elements from earlier Superman stories. The Eradicator, who we saw a couple times. We saw him, or it rather, in the Superman Exile storyline as a plot MacGuffin, and then it was a bigger part of the plot in the Superman Eradication story. And then here we see it as the Visored Superman, and everyone thinks, well, maybe that could be one of the real Supermen, because a lot of people are arguing about which one is the real Superman, and everyone pretty much knows it's not Superboy. Steel, he never really said that he was Superman, but then a lot of people are thinking maybe the Cyborg is the real Superman coming back from the dead, or maybe the Eradicator is the real one. I think Guy Gardner, he said that the Cyborg was the real Superman, and then later, of course, he's not. The Cyborg is actually Hank Henshaw, who showed up in the Dark Knight over Metropolis storyline. If you have that in trade, you saw Hank Henshaw's first appearance. He was the Reed Richards of that Fantastic Four parody issue that I'm not sure if John Byrne had anything to do with that issue. First I was thinking that he did, now I'm doubting myself. I don't remember who did that issue. I know that Byrne didn't draw it, but he may have written it. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, it was this issue that was kind of parodying the Fantastic Four, but taking it in a really dark and twisted angle, and Hank Henshaw was the leader of that foursome that went into outer space, and they all seemingly died. Except for Henshaw, his consciousness went into the machine ether, and then he became the Cyborg Superman, and kind of went crazy. And then this story also has some other alterations and significant changes for the DC Universe. It leads to Coast City being destroyed, or actually Coast City is destroyed here, and then that leads to Hal Jordan becoming Parallax, and then that is a huge thing for the Green Lantern comics over the next like 10 or 15 years. In fact, Parallax is still kind of having ripples over the Green Lantern comics today. You'll still occasionally have characters referencing Hal Jordan becoming Parallax in the Green Lantern comics of today. But this was really cool because it's not just a big event that's just trying to rake in money. It takes the status quo and it turns it on its head. It introduces new characters. It changes the status quo in such a way where it's not just a big story just because big, huge event stories are really cool. It does some new things. It does some interesting things. And I am always willing to forgive a story any faults that it might have if it's willing to do that. If it's willing to introduce new and interesting characters like this story does. If it's willing to change things up a little bit, shake them up just enough so that things aren't exactly the same as they were before this big event. And this story does that. I really love it whenever stories can do that. I would definitely recommend that you check out the Reign of the Supermen or the Return of Superman. This particular version right here has served me very well. I'm sure there's plenty of other printings of this story out there. I would even say you don't have to read Death of Superman or World Without a Superman. You should read World Without a Superman just because of all the tragic stuff going on with Lois Lane and Lana Lang and all of those people crying, the Kents. You should read it for that, but you don't have to read it to get this. It sets up a little bit of the stuff going on here, but this pretty easily, it gives everything that you need to know in this book. So I highly recommend this story right here. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different kind of video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.